I am not a hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I am not of the body, is it therefore not the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. All of you together are Christ's body, and each of you is part of it. I want you to say to the person next to you, you are needed. You are needed, right? That's important. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you are needed. And here's the thing, sometimes we want to have that, be that part of the body where everyone notices, right? The hand, the feet, the mouth, the ears, right? But here's the thing, do you see the heart? Do you see the brain? Sometimes in some people you say, is that thing working, right? But here's the thing, you don't see some of these organs, right? But without them working, is everything else is the hand, is everything else gonna work? No, right? So it's important, sometimes, particularly the unseen parts of the body can be the most important. And the rest of the body would not work the way it's supposed to. You see, serving can sometimes be different than volunteering. You see, the desire to volunteer might come from a good or neutral mindset, or sometimes it could be self-serving, such as for a resume or a university application, and all of a sudden, I've got this desire to volunteer. No young people have done that before. Some serving, sometimes coming from the wrong motive, wants us to look good. We want to look good. But a servant wants God to look good. Matthew 5:16 says that we should glorify God in our works, and therefore he gets the glory. A volunteer, maybe with the wrong ambitions and motives, focuses on what they give. A servant looks at what Jesus gave. Volunteering sometimes can be about convenience. Being a servant is about commitment. Now, this example was given to me a while back. There was a man who was preparing breakfast, and this man on the menu who is having steak and eggs. He hadn't been invited to the vegetarian cooking classes yet. Now, the question was asked, who made the bigger sacrifice, the chicken or the cow? You see, the chicken provided the egg, but the cow was committed. Right? The 7 people that got that, you know what I mean. So if you notice something that's undone, listen, God may have designed you to notice it, not to complain about it, but be willing to help fix that thing, right? To my single friends, if you're looking for somebody, hopefully they're committed. If they aren't serving in God's house, what makes you think they will serve in yours? Right? If they don't have a spirit of servanthood, what makes you think that they will serve you? And are you getting into that relationship for the right reason? You can't fake showing up. You can't fake showing up for your devotions. You can't fake. It's easy to come to church, say happy Sabbath, look really nice, have perfectly polished teeth. But here's the thing, guys. When it comes to serving, you can't fake showing up. Does your prayer life consist of asking God what he can do for you, or do you sometimes maybe flip it around and say, God, what can I do for you? John F. Kennedy once said, do not ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? But sometimes, now I'm not saying you shouldn't come to the church for help, that's not what I'm saying. And this is why the church exists. But sometimes we need to ask, what can I do for my church, rather than what the church can do for me? You see, Lucifer was a servant, but he became a disgruntled volunteer, right? He was at the top, he had the highest position. All of a sudden, there was a special board meeting that maybe he wasn't invited to, and he just started spinning out of control. Rather than going directly to God with questions, he decided to spend some time placing doubts and changing the very view that many angels had of God. Judas was a great servant, right? The Bible tells us that he was a scribe. He had the Bible memorized. But this volunteer was sick of not getting paid. This volunteer decided, you know what? I'm in charge of the money, and I'm giving my time. I'm going to grab a little bit for myself. And sadly, this volunteer who had a hidden agenda, this agenda ended up ultimately costing him his life. So here's the thing, guys. When it comes to serving, sometimes we do things that maybe we don't want to do, but it prepares us to do bigger things that we had no idea God had planned for us. Another lesson I want to talk about when it comes to serving is that blessings always come back. Blessings always return to the giver. Isaiah 58. I love this chapter. We're counseled to actually memorize the whole thing. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out, when you see the naked that you cover him, and not hide yourself from your own flesh? Then your light shall break forth like the morning, your healing shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, Here I am. If you take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger and speaking wickedness, if you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. And you shall be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. What's so beautiful about this chapter is the one that feeds, that clothes, that houses, the blessings come back to them. You know, I've studied, there's this beautiful book called Depression, The Way Out by Dr. Neil Nedley. And what's so beautiful about that book is it counsels people that if you're down and you're having a really tough time, that you're supposed to find someone else who's going through something even worse than you. And what amazingly happens is that the blessing comes back. The Bible tells us that if you extend yourself to other people, God will extend himself to you. What's so interesting about the scenario back in Matthew 14 is that Jesus, after John the Baptist died, he served all these people, and then he continued, as you continue to read the chapter, people were hungry. There were 5,000 people, plus their families, that were really, really hungry. And a young boy brings his lunch, and the disciples are sharing this food over and over, and they're probably looking at this bread and this fish saying, man, I'd really like to put maybe one in my pocket. And as these guys are serving and they're probably hungry, the Bible points something out that I found was very, very interesting. There was 12 disciples, right? How many baskets were left over? 12. Those guys had to wait for their blessing, for their miracle, but it came. You know, we're counseled to be patient saints. And sometimes when we're doing the blessing and we're giving to others, we're thinking, man, how am I going to meet ends meet? How am I going to provide for the things that I need? God has a basket waiting for you of blessings. Sometimes you just need to wait for. This beautiful book called Christ Object Lesson says, every effort made for Christ will react in blessings upon ourselves. Just like the law of gravity, every time it's going to happen. Sometimes you have to wait. If we look at the life of Nehemiah, this man was taken captive into the Persian palace. This man must have had some sort of pristine character. The king of Persia would rather trust a slave to be his cupbearer than one of his own people. He was so close to this king that he could have destroyed him at any time. You know, he could have mixed something in with his drink. You know, you did enslave my people. But this Nehemiah, this engineer, was faithful to God. Nehemiah, Joseph, Daniel, all these different people were put in key places in moments in time, and they all redefined history. When you see the needs of people, do you feel the pathos? Do you feel the passion for the needy? What kind of servant must Nehemiah have been? You know, he wasn't a clergyman. Ezra stepped in for some of those duties. But all of us are called to serve, whether we like it or not. If Nehemiah can serve a king that tied up all his people and took them out of the land that they were living, can you serve that coworker? Can you serve that neighbor? Can you serve that person that gets under your skin? You know, we look at the Good Samaritan story. Levite and a priest, they had too many things going on that Sabbath. But yet this Samaritan, whose theology may have been off, but his practical application of the gospel was spot on? Are we being willing to be inconvenienced for the sake of someone else?